The figure beneath the elm tree had been there for 9 nights, and Keira Ashford had counted every single one of them from behind the safety of her second-floor window. She stood now in the darkness of her bedroom, curtains pulled back just enough to see him, this stranger who never moved closer, never knocked, never did anything except stand there like a marble statue in a graveyard. The streetlight caught him in odd angles, illuminating skin so pale it looked like porcelain, hair that fell white and silver around his shoulders. He wore clothes that seemed expensive even from this distance, all dark fabrics and sharp lines, and he held himself with a posture that spoke of royalty or military training or something else entirely. Keira's fingers touched the cold glass. Her therapist would call this progress, she thought wryly, that she was even standing at the window instead of huddled in the corner of her closet where the locks were strongest. 13 months since the break-in. 13 months since she'd stepped outside her front door. 13 months of grocery deliveries and therapy sessions over video chat and her mother's increasingly worried phone calls asking when she'd be ready to come visit, to just try, sweetheart, just one step outside. But this man beneath the elm tree had become something else in her carefully controlled world. She'd noticed him first 2 weeks ago, thought perhaps he was waiting for someone in one of the neighboring houses. Then he'd returned the next night, and the next. Always in the same spot, always standing with that peculiar stillness that made her think of predators and princes in equal measure. The rational part of her mind whispered that she should call the police, that this was stalking, that any normal person would be terrified. But Keira Ashford had spent the last year being terrified of everything, of open doors and strangers and the world beyond her walls, and somehow this silent watcher had become the opposite of fear. He never approached, he never threatened, he simply stood there, and in his presence she felt something she hadn't experienced since that horrible night, safe. She knew it made no sense. She knew her therapist would have a field day with this psychological knot. But tonight, the 9th night, Keira found her hand moving to the window latch before she could stop herself. The old wood resisted, swollen with spring humidity, then gave way with a soft crack that sounded like thunder in the quiet street. Cool air rushed in, carrying the scent of earth and rain, and something else, something ancient and dark that made the hair on her arms stand up. The figure moved for the first time. His head turned, tilted upward, and even across the distance between them, Keira could see his eyes widen. They caught the light like a cat's eyes, reflecting silver and gold, and she understood in that instant that whatever this man was, he wasn't human. She should have slammed the window shut, should have run, should have added another lock to her collection, another barrier between herself and the world. Instead, she leaned forward slightly and heard her own voice, rusty from disuse, carry out into the night. "Who are you?" For a long moment he didn't answer. He simply stared up at her with an expression that might have been wonder or terror or both. Then, in a voice that sounded like crushed velvet and old wine, he said, "Someone who should not be here." "Then why are you?" "Because I cannot seem to make myself leave." The honesty in those words struck something deep in Keira's chest. She understood that feeling, understood being trapped by invisible chains that made no sense to anyone else. Her prison was inside her house, but perhaps his was something different, something just as confining. "What's your name?" she asked. Another pause, longer this time. When he finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper, but she heard every syllable with perfect clarity. "Mordecai Zorya, once king of the night court, now nothing at all." Keira blinked. King, night court, words that should have sounded ridiculous, like something from a fantasy novel, but when he said them, they carried the weight of absolute truth. She found herself gripping the windowsill, leaning further out, driven by a curiosity stronger than her fear. "A vampire," she said, and it wasn't a question. His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one remembered from a time when such expressions came easily. "You don't sound frightened." "I've been frightened for 13 months straight," Keira replied. "I think I've used up my lifetime supply." She studied him, this impossible creature beneath her window. "Why haven't you knocked on my door?" The not smile vanished. Something flickered across his face, something that looked almost like pain. "I cannot. Cannot or will not." "Cannot," he repeated, and the word held layers of meaning she didn't yet understand. The laws that govern my kind are absolute. I cannot enter any dwelling without invitation, and I cannot bring myself to ask." Keira absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. She'd read enough vampire fiction to know the folklore, the rules about thresholds and invitations, but she'd always assumed they were metaphors, romantic notions. Hearing Mordecai speak of them as literal law shifted something in her understanding of the world. "Why not?" she asked. "Why can't you ask?" He looked away, out toward the empty street, his profile sharp and beautiful in the streetlight. "Because I have nowhere else I am permitted to stand. If you refuse me, if you send me away, there is no third place, there is no haven. I was cast out of my court 3 years ago, exiled from every territory held by vampire law. This street, this public ground, is all I have left." The words landed heavy and cold between them. Keira felt her throat tighten with an empathy so fierce it startled her. She knew about exile, about being cut off from the world, about having nowhere safe to go. She lived it every day, self-imposed though her prison might be. 3 years, she said softly. "And you've just been wandering?" "Wandering implies movement with purpose. I have been drifting. Until now." His eyes snapped back to her, and the intensity in that gaze made her breath catch. "Until now," he agreed. "Until I saw you, 2 weeks ago, standing at this very window. You looked out at the world with such longing and such terror, both at once, and I recognized something of myself in that expression. I told myself I would walk past, that I had no right to linger. But I found myself here the next night, and the next. I have been trying to find the courage to leave, and instead, I have been waiting for you to appear each evening like some pathetic creature addicted to a light he cannot approach." Kira's heart hammered in her chest. No one had seen her, truly seen her, since the break-in. Everyone else looked at her with pity or frustration, treating her like a problem to be solved. But this vampire king, this exile, saw her as someone he recognized, someone who shared his particular cage. "I've been watching for you too," she confessed. "Every night, you've become part of my routine. Check the locks, close the curtains, except for this one. Wait for the man beneath the elm tree. I didn't know why you never came closer. I thought maybe you were afraid of me." "Afraid," Mordecai repeated, and this time he did smile, though it was edged with bitterness. "Yes, though not in the way you imagine. I'm afraid of hope, Keira Ashford. I'm afraid of asking for something I have no right to want and being refused. It has been easier to stand here, to exist in this space where neither acceptance nor rejection can touch me." "How do you know my name?" "You're male," he said simply. "I can see your mailbox from here. I'm not proud of my curiosity, but I'm past the point of pretending nobility." She should have felt violated by that admission. Instead, she felt oddly touched that he'd cared enough to look, to learn something about her beyond what he could see through a window. Her therapist would definitely have things to say about that reaction, but Keira had spent 13 months listening to her own fears, and tonight they were remarkably quiet. "Come back tomorrow night," she said. "Same time. We can talk more." Something transformed in Mordecai's expression, something that looked like sunrise over a landscape that hadn't seen light in centuries. "You want me to return?" "I want you to return." He bowed, a gesture so formal and elegant it might have been courtly, then stepped back into the deeper shadows beneath the elm tree. Keira watched him fade into the darkness, watched until she couldn't see him anymore, and only then did she close the window. Her hands were shaking, she realized, not from fear, but from adrenaline, from the dizzy rush of having done something brave for the first time in over a year. She'd opened a window. She'd spoken to a stranger. She'd invited him back. She laughed, a slightly unhinged sound in the empty room, and went to bed feeling lighter than she had in months. The next night, Mordecai stood beneath the elm tree as promised, and when Keira opened her window, she found herself smiling before she'd even formed words. He inclined his head in greeting, and they fell into conversation as naturally as if they'd known each other for years instead of a single strange encounter. He told her about the vampire courts, about hierarchies and politics that stretched back millennia. His own rule had lasted 3 centuries before a coup orchestrated by his cousin had seen him cast out, accused of crimes he swore he never committed. The details were complex, involving ancient blood laws and betrayals that read like something from a Shakespearean tragedy, but the core was simple. He'd trusted the wrong person, and now he was paying an eternal price. "Couldn't you challenge the ruling?" Keira asked. "Appeal to some higher authority?" "There is no higher authority than the collective will of the Night Court, and my cousin, Lucian, has always been better at words than I am. He painted me as a tyrant, as someone who had lost touch with the needs of our people. By the time I understood what was happening, the court had already turned." Mordecai's jaw tightened. "I could have fought. I could have started a war. But that would have meant vampire blood spilled on vampire hands, and that is the one law that cannot be broken without consequences that would destroy us all. So I left. I walked away from my throne, my kingdom, my home, and I have been searching for somewhere else to belong ever since." Keira listened, her elbows resting on the windowsill, chin propped on her hands. The spring air was cool against her skin, and somewhere down the street a dog barked, ordinary sounds in an increasingly extraordinary conversation. "Tell me about you," Mordecai said. "Tell me why you don't leave your house." She'd expected the question, but it still made her stomach clench. She didn't talk about it, not even with her therapist most days. But something about the distance between them, about speaking across this threshold neither of them could cross, made the words come easier. "A man broke into my house 13 months ago," she said quietly. "I was asleep. I woke up to him standing over my bed. He had a knife, and he told me all the things he was going to do to me, and I thought I was going to die. But my neighbor heard me scream, and he called the police, and they came before anything really terrible happened. Before he did more than hold the knife to my throat and tell me I was his now, that he'd be back." Mordecai had gone absolutely still, and when Keira glanced at him she saw his hands were clenched at his sides, white knuckles standing out against pale skin. "They caught him," she continued. "He's in prison. My rational mind knows he can't hurt me, but my body doesn't believe it. Every time I try to walk out my front door, I have a panic attack. My vision goes gray, my heart races, I can't breathe. I made it 3 steps onto my porch once and passed out. The paramedics said it was hyperventilation, but I know what it really was. It was terror. Pure, primal terror that the moment I step outside, the moment I make myself vulnerable, something terrible will happen again." "So you have been trapped here," Mordecai said softly, "in a prison of your own fear." "Yes, my family doesn't really understand. They think I should just force myself, just push through it. My mother especially. She thinks I'm being dramatic, that I'm letting this control my life. But it's not a choice. I've tried. God, I've tried so many times. I just can't." "I understand," Mordecai said, and the absolute certainty in his voice made Keira's eyes burn with unexpected tears. "I understand what it is to be caged by things others cannot see, to have people tell you to simply be different, as if will alone could overcome the walls that have been built inside you." They looked at each other across the distance, across the space between window and street, and something passed between them that felt like recognition, like finding another person who spoke your secret language. "Why do you make me feel safe?" Keira asked suddenly. "You're a vampire, you're a predator. By all logic, I should be terrified of you. But instead, when you're standing there, I feel like nothing bad can happen, like you're standing guard." Mordecai's expression shifted, and for the first time since she'd seen him, he looked uncertain, vulnerable. "Because that is what I have been doing," he admitted. "Standing guard, protecting you from anything that might approach in the night. It is the only purpose I have allowed myself in 3 years, the only thing that has made me feel like more than a ghost. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are brave in ways you don't give yourself credit for. I know you keep fighting even when the world has given you every reason to surrender. I know that watching you stand at this window each night, choosing to look out at the world despite your fear, has reminded me that there are things worth protecting in this world, worth standing still for, worth being patient for." Keira felt something crack open inside her chest, something warm and terrifying and wonderful all at once. She'd spent 13 months feeling broken, feeling like damaged goods, like someone who would never be whole again. But Mordecai looked at her like she was brave, like she was worth something. Tell me more about the night court, she said, needing to shift the conversation before she started crying in earnest. What was it like being king? They talked until nearly 3 in the morning, until Kira's eyes were heavy and her voice was hoarse. Mordecai told her about the underground halls of the night court, carved beneath an old city in Eastern Europe, about chandeliers made of crystal and blood rubies, about councils that met by moonlight and hunts that ranged across forests older than countries. He spoke of vampire culture, of their art and music, and the complicated web of alliances that kept the peace between courts. We are not monsters, he said. Not entirely. We need blood to survive, yes, but we have systems. Willing donors, blood banks, arrangements with the dying who offer their final gift. The days of hunting humans like prey are centuries past, at least among the civilized courts. We have laws. We have honor codes. We have tried to evolve beyond our baser nature. But you're still dangerous, Keira said. You're still stronger, faster, immortal. Yes, we are still dangerous. Which is why the laws about thresholds exist, about invitations. They protect humans from us, create a barrier that cannot be crossed without consent. It is one of the oldest magics woven into the fabric of what we are. A vampire cannot enter a private home unless invited by someone who lives there. And once exiled, once forbidden from our own territories, we cannot even ask. The magic prevents it. I could not knock on your door, even if I found the courage. My hand would stop before it touched the wood. I could not call out to you. The words would die in my throat. All I can do is stand here, on public ground, and hope. Hope for what? Hope that someone might see me, might choose to let me in. But it has been 3 years, and no one has. No one wants to invite a vampire into their home, especially not an exiled king with no court and no power. I am a risk, a liability, a creature that shouldn't exist in this modern world. Until you opened your window, until you spoke to me first, I had begun to believe I would stand on various street corners for eternity, watching life happen through glass I could never touch. Kira's heart ached. She understood that feeling so intimately it hurt, watching life happen beyond a barrier you couldn't cross, wanting so badly to reach out and connect but being stopped by invisible walls. Come back tomorrow, she said, and the night after, and the night after that. I'm not going anywhere, and apparently neither are you. We might as well be trapped together. Mordecai's smile, when it came, was luminous. I would like that very much. The nights became a ritual. Keira would finish her dinner, check her locks twice out of habit, then move to her bedroom window at 10 o'clock exactly. Mordecai would already be there, waiting beneath the elm tree, and they would talk until the early hours of the morning. Some nights they spoke of heavy things, his exile, her trauma, the weight of their respective prisons. Other nights they talked about books and music and the small absurdities of existence. She learned that he loved jazz music, that he'd been alive to see its birth in New Orleans and had followed its evolution with fascination. He learned that she'd been a librarian before the break-in, that she still ordered books by the dozen, and that her house was slowly being overtaken by stacks of unread novels. He told her about vampire society's complicated relationship with religion and philosophy. She told him about her master's thesis on medieval literature and how she'd always been drawn to stories of monsters and redemption. Because you believed monsters could be redeemed? Mordecai asked one night, his head tilted in that particular way he had when something interested him. Because I believed everyone deserved the chance to be more than their worst moment, Keira replied, even creatures made of darkness. And now, knowing that monsters are real, that I am one of them? She looked at him, really looked at him, taking in the sharp beauty of his features, the ancient sadness in his eyes, the way he held himself with both pride and resignation. Now I believe it even more. You're not a monster, Mordecai. You're just someone who's been hurt and hasn't found his way back yet. And you? He asked softly. Are you finding your way back? Keira glanced behind her at the safe interior of her bedroom, then back out at the street beyond. I don't know. Some days I think maybe I'm getting better. I can stand at the window without my heart racing now. I can look at the front door without feeling sick. But actually walking through it, actually stepping outside, that still feels impossible. Impossible is a strong word. So is exile. But here we both are. Mordecai laughed, a sound she'd grown to treasure because it came so rarely. Touché. On the 15th night, Keira made a decision. She'd been thinking about it for days, turning it over in her mind, weighing risks and fears and the strange, fierce connection she felt to this vampire who stood guard outside her window. When she opened the window that night, she didn't wait for him to speak first. "I want to invite you in," she said. Mordecai went very still. "Keira, I've been thinking about it. You can't enter without an invitation. You've been standing out there for weeks now. It's getting colder, and I know you said you don't feel temperature the same way, but still, and I want—" She paused, trying to find the right words. "I want to see you closer than across a street. I want to sit in the same room and talk without having to shout over the distance. I trust you." "You shouldn't." The words were harsh, almost desperate. "Keira, you don't know what you're offering. I am vampire. I am predator. Inviting me across your threshold is not something to be done lightly. I know what you are. You've been honest with me about everything. And you've had weeks to hurt me if that was your intention. You could have compelled me, or glamored me, or whatever it is vampires do. But you haven't. You've just stood there, night after night, keeping me company, being my friend, maybe being more than that." Her voice dropped on those last words, and she saw the impact of them hit him like a physical blow. "Keira, I'm not asking you to come in right now," she continued quickly. "I know it's a big decision. I'm just saying I've thought about it, and when you're ready, if you want to, the invitation is there. You would be welcome in my home." Mordecai looked up at her with an expression so raw it made her chest tighten. "Do you understand what that means? For someone like me? That kind of trust, that kind of welcome? It means everything. It means home. And I have not had a home in 3 years. Then maybe it's time you did." They stared at each other, and Keira felt the weight of the moment, felt the way the world seemed to hold its breath around them. Then Mordecai placed one hand over his heart and bowed. That same courtly gesture from the first night, and when he straightened, there were tears on his pale cheeks that caught the streetlight like diamonds. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you, Keira Ashford. I will consider your offer with the gravity and respect it deserves." But he didn't come in that night, or the next night, or the night after that. He continued to stand beneath the elm tree, continued their conversations across the distance, but he never asked her to repeat the invitation, never took that step forward. Keira didn't push. She understood fear, understood the way it could paralyze you even when you wanted desperately to move forward. If Mordecai needed time, she would give him time. She had nowhere to go after all. On the 20th night, things changed. Keira was at her window as usual when she saw 2 figures approaching down the street. Even from a distance, she could tell they were vampire. There was something about the way they moved, the predatory grace, the inhuman stillness between steps. Mordecai saw them too, and his entire body went rigid. "Get away from the window," he called up to her, his voice sharp with command. "Close the curtains. Lock it now." "What? Why?" "Do it, Keira, please." The fear in his voice frightened her more than anything else could have. She stepped back from the window but didn't close it, couldn't quite make herself retreat entirely. Instead, she watched as the 2 vampires approached Mordecai, as they circled him like wolves around a kill. One of them spoke, his voice carrying easily in the quiet night, accent thick and Eastern European. "Mordecai Zorya, the fallen king. How pathetic you have become, standing on street corners like a beggar." "Lucian." Mordecai's voice was flat, emotionless. "I should have known you would come eventually." Lucian, the cousin who had orchestrated his exile. Keira's hands clenched on the windowsill. "Did you think I would simply let you exist in peace?" Lucian continued, moving closer. He was beautiful in the way all vampires seem to be, with sharp features and white blonde hair, but there was something cruel in the curve of his mouth. "Did you think I would forget about you just because you slunk away into the shadows? You are an embarrassment to the Night Court, a reminder of weakness and failure. The fact that you still draw breath is an insult." "Then kill me and be done with it," Mordecai said. "You have the backing of the court. No one would contest your right." Oh, I intend to. But first I wanted to see where you ended up, what hole you crawled into, and I find you here, mooning outside a human woman's window like some lovesick boy from a romance novel. How deliciously pathetic. Kira's stomach dropped. She should stay quiet, should stay hidden, but the contempt in Lucien's voice, the way Mordecai stood there accepting the abuse like he deserved it, made anger spike hot in her chest. "Leave him alone," she called out before she could stop herself. 3 pairs of eyes snapped to her. Lucian's smile widened into something terrible. "Ah, the human speaks. Tell me, little one, has our dear Mordecai been whispering sweet promises to you? Has he told you he loves you, that you're special? Vampires have had centuries to perfect the art of seduction. We can make you believe anything." "He hasn't told me anything except the truth," Keira shot back, "which is more than you seem capable of. He told me what you did, how you betrayed him, how you stole his crown with lies." Lucian's expression darkened. "Careful, human. You have no idea what you're involving yourself in. I know a bully when I see one, and I know that Mordecai is worth 100 of you." "Keira, stop," Mordecai said urgently. "Please, don't provoke him." But Lucian was already moving, faster than human eyes should be able to track, and suddenly he was standing directly beneath her window, looking up with eyes that had gone from blue to solid black. Such loyalty, such spirit. "Perhaps I should teach you the price of interfering in vampire politics." Terror locked Kira's throat. This was different from the break-in, different from a human threat. This was a predator, an apex predator, and every instinct she had screamed at her to run. But she couldn't run. She never could. Mordecai was suddenly there, putting himself between Lucian and the house, and his voice was colder than Keira had ever heard it. "You will not touch her." "And who will stop me? You? You have no power here, cousin, no territory, no rights. You are nothing." "I am enough to keep you from her." Lucian laughed. "Noble to the end. Very well. Let us see how noble you feel after I break every bone in your body and leave you in the gutter where you belong." The fight happened so fast Keira could barely follow it. One moment they were standing there, the next they were a blur of motion, moving with speed that defied physics. She heard the sound of impact, saw Mordecai thrown back against a car hard enough to dent metal, saw him rise again and launch himself at Lucian with a fury she'd never seen in him before. The other vampire, the one who had come with Lucian, stood back and watched, apparently content to let this play out. Kira's mind raced. She couldn't just stand here. She had to do something, had to help somehow. But what could a human woman who couldn't even leave her house do against vampires? The invitation. The thought struck like lightning. Mordecai had said the threshold law was absolute, that vampires couldn't enter without permission, which meant if she invited him in, he would have sanctuary. He would have a home ground, a place Lucian couldn't follow. She didn't let herself think about it, didn't let herself weigh the risks. She just acted. "Mordecai," she screamed. "Mordecai Zorya, I invite you into my home. I invite you across my threshold. Come inside, now." Mordecai's head snapped toward her, his eyes wide with shock. For a heartbeat he didn't move, and Keira thought maybe it didn't work. Maybe the magic didn't respond to desperation and fear. Then he was moving, faster than Lucian could react, crossing the street and the yard, and suddenly he was climbing, impossible grace carrying him up the side of her house to her second-floor window. "May I?" he asked, one hand on the windowsill, and even bleeding and battered he waited for explicit permission. "Yes, God, yes, come in." He tumbled through the window and Keira stumbled back, giving him room. The moment he was fully inside, something changed in the air, a crackling sensation like static electricity. Mordecai straightened, and the fear that had been etched into his features smoothed away, replaced by something else entirely. Relief, strength, home. Outside, Lucian screamed in rage. "You cannot hide in there forever, Mordecai. Eventually you will have to come out, and when you do, I will be waiting." "Then you will wait a long time," Mordecai called back, his voice steady now, "because I have been invited, I have been welcomed, and that is a magic you cannot break, cousin. Leave, now, before I decide to teach you why I was king for 3 centuries. Lucian stood there, fury radiating from every line of his body, but he made no move to approach the house. The threshold law held. After a long moment, he spat something in a language Keira didn't understand and stalked away, the other vampire following behind him. Keira waited until they were out of sight before she allowed herself to collapse. Her legs gave out and she sat down hard on her bedroom floor, adrenaline shaking through her system. Mordecai was beside her instantly, his hands hovering over her shoulders like he wanted to touch, but wasn't sure if he should. "Are you all right?" he asked urgently. "Keira, are you hurt?" "I'm fine. Are you?" She looked up at him, really taking him in for the first time up close. He was taller than she'd realized, and even more beautiful, his features sharp and elegant and utterly inhuman. The blood on his lip was already healing, the cuts on his hands closing even as she watched. His eyes were silver in the light of her bedroom, silver shot through with gold, and they looked at her with such concern it made her breath catch. "I will heal. We always heal. But you took a terrible risk, Keira. You invited me in during a fight, without thinking, without considering what it might mean. It means you're safe. It means Lucian can't hurt you, at least not here. That's what matters. You gave me access to your home, to your sanctuary. Do you understand what you've done?" He was still kneeling beside her, close enough now that she could feel the cold radiating from his skin, could see the way his chest didn't move with breath. "I saved your life, I think. Can vampires die?" "We can. It takes a great deal, but yes, we can die. Lucian was fully prepared to kill me tonight. Would have if you hadn't intervened." Mordecai's jaw tightened. "I have put you in danger. He knows about you now. He will use you against me if he can." "Then I guess it's a good thing I never go outside," Keira said, and the absurdity of it made her laugh, a slightly hysterical sound. The agoraphobic human and the exiled vampire king. We're quite a pair. Mordecai studied her for a long moment, and then he did something unexpected. He smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine, and it transformed his entire face. "We are, aren't we?" They sat there on her bedroom floor, looking at each other, and Keira felt something shift between them, some final barrier falling away. He was in her house now, in her space. The distance that had defined their entire relationship was gone, and in its place was a closeness that felt both terrifying and right. "Thank you," Mordecai said softly. "Thank you for your invitation. Thank you for your trust. Thank you for seeing me as something worth saving. I will honor this gift, Keira. I swear it." "I know you will." She reached out, hesitated, then let her hand rest on his where it lay on the floor between them. His skin was cold but solid, real, and his fingers immediately turned to lace with hers. "You've been protecting me for weeks. It was my turn to protect you. You humble me." "Good. You could use a little humbling, all that kingly pride." He laughed, and the sound filled her bedroom with warmth. They stayed like that for a long time, hands linked, sitting on the floor while the night deepened around them. Eventually, Mordecai insisted on checking all her windows and doors, making sure they were secure, and Keira watched him move through her space with a mixture of wonder and something deeper, something that might have been love beginning to take root. When he was satisfied that her home was secure, he returned to her bedroom. "I should go. Find somewhere else to—" "Stay," Keira interrupted. "Please. I know it's probably weird, but I don't want to be alone tonight, and you said you have nowhere else, so just stay. You can take the couch or the guest room or whatever. Just stay." Mordecai looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the same longing she felt, the same desperate need for connection, for someone who understood. "Are you certain?" "I'm certain." So he stayed. They talked through the rest of the night, sitting in her living room with tea for her and nothing for him, and Keira learned what it was to have someone fully present, fully focused on her. Mordecai listened like every word she said mattered, asked questions that showed he genuinely cared about the answers, and told her stories from his long life that made her laugh and gasp and wish she'd been there to see them. When dawn approached, he grew quieter, and Keira noticed the way he kept glancing toward the windows. "The sun," she said. "You need to avoid it." "Yes, contrary to some myths, it won't kill me instantly, but it will burn. Badly. I usually find shelter before dawn. The guest room has blackout curtains. I used to work night shifts at the library, so I installed them throughout the house. You can sleep there if you want, if that's okay." The gratitude in his expression made her chest ache. "That would be most welcome. She showed him to the guest room, made sure the curtains were properly sealed, and left him with an awkward good night that felt insufficient for everything that had happened. Then she went to her own room and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, processing the fact that there was a vampire sleeping down the hall. A vampire she'd invited into her home. A vampire she was pretty sure she was falling in love with. Her therapist was going to have so many questions. The next few days fell into a new rhythm. Mordecai slept during the day, and Keira went about her usual routine of work emails and online meetings and trying not to think too hard about her house guest. When night fell, they would spend hours together, cooking dinner for her while he kept her company, watching movies, talking about everything and nothing. He was careful to maintain distance, never pushing into her space uninvited, always asking permission before he touched anything of hers. But the awareness between them grew stronger each night. Keira found herself hyper-conscious of his presence, of the way he moved, the sound of his voice, the rare moments when he smiled. She caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made heat pool in her stomach, made her wonder what it would be like to close the distance between them, to find out if his mouth was as cold as his hands. On the fourth night after the fight, Keira worked up the courage to ask the question that had been haunting her. What happens now? With Lucian? Will he come back? Mordecai, who had been reading one of her books on the couch, set it aside and gave her his full attention. He will try. The fact that I have sanctuary now, that I have a home base, changes the dynamic between us. I am no longer completely vulnerable, but he will not give up. His hatred runs too deep. Why does he hate you so much? You said he orchestrated your exile, but what did you do to make him hate you in the first place? Mordecai's expression shuddered. I existed. I was born the eldest son of the previous king, which meant I inherited the throne. Lucian was always second, always the spare, and he never forgave me for it. Never mind that I did not ask to be king, that I would have gladly shared power with him if he had wanted partnership instead of dominance. He wanted what was mine, and when he could not have it, he decided to destroy me. That's not a reason. That's jealousy. Jealousy is reason enough for many terrible things. Keira thought about that, about the casual cruelty of someone deciding your existence was an obstacle to be removed. She'd seen that same casual cruelty in the eyes of her intruder, in his certainty that he had the right to take what he wanted from her. The parallel made her shiver. I won't let him hurt you, she said fiercely. This is my house, my territory. You're under my protection now. Mordecai's expression softened into something tender. My brave Keira. But you should not have to protect me. I should be protecting you. Maybe we protect each other. Did you consider that? I am beginning to. He shifted forward on the couch, his hands clasped between his knees. Keira, I need to tell you something, about the way I feel, about what you have come to mean to me. Her heart hammered. Okay. That first night I saw you at the window, I told myself I was simply curious. Here was a human woman who looked out at the world with such longing, and I wondered what had put that expression on her face. But then I came back the next night, and the next, and I realized it was not curiosity keeping me here. It was you, your strength, your courage, the way you kept standing at that window night after night despite your fear. I have lived for centuries, for Keira. I have known countless people, seen empires rise and fall, witnessed wonders and horrors beyond counting. But I have never met anyone like you. You have reminded me what it is to feel, to hope, to want something more than mere survival. Keira's throat was tight. Mordecai. I am in love with you, he said simply. I think I have been since that first moment you opened the window and spoke to me instead of running away. I know I have no right to these feelings. I know I am vampire and you are human, and there are 1,000 reasons why this cannot work. But I need you to know. I need you to understand that you have given me back my life, and I will spend whatever time I have left being grateful for it. The words hung in the air between them, vulnerable and beautiful and terrifying. Keira felt tears prick her eyes, felt her heart swell with an emotion so big it threatened to crack her ribs. I love you too, she whispered. I think I have been since you started standing guard beneath my window, since you made me feel safe when nothing else in the world could. You've given me back my life too, Mordecai. You've made me want to be brave again." He moved then, crossing the space between them in a heartbeat, kneeling in front of where she sat in her armchair. His hands came up to cup her face, cold fingers gentle against her warm skin, and he looked at her like she was something precious, something worth treasuring. "May I kiss you?" he asked. "Please," she breathed. His mouth met hers, and it was cold and soft and perfect. He kissed her like she was fragile, like he was afraid she might break, and Keira made a frustrated sound and pulled him closer, deepening the kiss. She felt him smile against her lips, felt the moment he let go of some of his careful control, and kissed her back with real hunger, real need. They broke apart, both breathing hard. Well, she was breathing hard. He was just staring at her with wonder in his eyes. "I have dreamed of this," he said roughly, "of touching you, holding you, but the reality is so much better than any fantasy." "Then don't stop," Keira said, and pulled him in again. They spent the rest of the night wrapped up in each other, kissing and talking and kissing some more, and Keira felt like she'd been asleep for 13 months and was finally waking up. Mordecai was careful with her, always checking that she was comfortable, always making sure she wanted what he was offering, and his consideration made her love him even more. When dawn approached and he had to retreat to the guest room, he kissed her one more time, long and slow and deep, and promised he'd see her when night fell again. Keira went to bed with a smile on her face and slept better than she had in over a year. The next week was the happiest Keira could remember. She and Mordecai fell into a routine that felt startlingly domestic. He would wake at sunset, find her wherever she was in the house, and they would spend the evening together. Sometimes they watched movies, sometimes they cooked elaborate meals she'd found online, sometimes they just sat and talked about their lives, their hopes, their fears. He told her about vampire culture, about the complicated web of alliances and enmities that governed the supernatural world. She told him about her dreams of traveling, of seeing all the places she'd only read about in books, once upon a time when leaving her house had seemed possible. "We could go together," Mordecai said one night. They were sitting on her couch, Keira tucked under his arm, his hand playing idly with her hair. "When you're ready, when you can walk out that door, I could show you the world, Keira, all the wonders I've seen in my long life. Paris at midnight, the northern lights from a mountaintop in Norway, ancient temples in Japan that still remember the old gods. I could give you all of it." "That sounds perfect," Keira said wistfully, "but I can't even make it to my front porch without having a panic attack. Seeing the world feels like an impossible dream." "Impossible is just another word for not yet," Mordecai replied. "You are stronger than you know, and when you're ready, I will be there, holding your hand, keeping you safe. I promise." The promise warmed her from the inside out, made her believe that maybe, just maybe, she could do this. With Mordecai beside her, perhaps the impossible could become possible. But their peace didn't last. On the 8th night after the fight, Keira woke to the sound of breaking glass. She bolted upright in bed, heart hammering, and her first thought was Lucian. Her second thought was Mordecai. She grabbed her phone and ran down the hall to the guest room, throwing open the door. Mordecai was already awake, already moving toward her with inhuman speed. "Stay here," he commanded. "Lock the door behind me. Do not come out until I tell you it's safe." "Mordecai. Please, Keira, I cannot fight and protect you at the same time. Trust me." She wanted to argue, wanted to stay by his side, but she could see the fear in his eyes, the desperate need for her to be somewhere he knew she was safe. So she nodded, and he kissed her hard and fast before stalking out into the hallway. Keira locked the door and pressed her ear against it, trying to hear what was happening. She heard voices, heard Mordecai's calm tones, and another voice she didn't recognize, male and angry. There was the sound of a scuffle, furniture breaking, and Kira's hands clenched into fists. She hated this, hated being helpless, hated hiding while Mordecai fought for both of them. Then she heard something that made her blood run cold. "Where is she, Mordecai? Where is the human? Lucian wants her, wants to teach you the price of defiance. Give her to us and this ends peacefully." "Over my dead body," Mordecai snarled. "That can be arranged." The sounds of fighting intensified, and Keira couldn't take it anymore. She unlocked the door and stepped out into the hallway, and what she saw made her stomach drop. There were 3 vampires in her living room, all fighting Mordecai at once. He was holding his own, barely, but he was outnumbered, and they were driving him back toward the windows, toward the direction where dawn would soon break. One of the vampires saw her and grinned, fangs flashing. "There she is. Come here, little human. Come meet your fate." He started toward her, and Mordecai roared, the sound inhuman and terrifying, and threw himself between them. But the other two vampires used his distraction, grabbed him from behind, and suddenly Mordecai was being restrained, held in place while the third vampire approached Keira with predatory intent. "No!" Mordecai struggled, but they held him fast. "Keira, run! Get to the bathroom! Lock yourself in! Don't—" "I revoke your invitation!" Keira screamed at the approaching vampire. "I revoke it! You are not welcome in my home! Get out!" The vampire stopped like he'd hit an invisible wall. His eyes widened in shock, and then he was being dragged backward, pulled by magic Keira couldn't see, yanked toward the broken window through which he'd entered. He screamed in fury as he was expelled from her home, tumbling out into the night. Keira turned to the other two, the ones holding Mordecai, and her voice was cold as ice. "I revoke your invitations too, all of you. Get out of my house, now!" The magic responded instantly. The two vampires were ripped away from Mordecai, pulled toward the window with such force they couldn't fight it. They tumbled out into the yard, and Keira could hear them cursing and threatening from outside. Mordecai stood there, bleeding and battered, staring at her with something like awe. "You can do that? Revoke invitations?" "Apparently." Keira was shaking, adrenaline crashing through her system. "They came in without asking, without my permission, so I figured the threshold magic would respond if I told them to leave." "Clever," Mordecai said, and then he was crossing the room to pull her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "God, Keira, you terrified me. You were supposed to stay locked in the guest room. I couldn't just hide while they hurt you. They were trying to get to you, to take you to Lucian. I would have died before I let that happen." "I know, that's why I came out, because I wasn't going to let you die for me." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes bright with emotion. "We are a mess, you and I. Both of us too stubborn to stay safe, both of us willing to sacrifice ourselves for the other." "Sounds like love to me," Keira said, and he kissed her fiercely, desperately, like she was air and he was drowning. When they finally broke apart, Keira looked at the broken window and the destruction of her living room and felt oddly calm. "We need to board that up before dawn and probably call the police, though I have no idea what I'm going to tell them. Tell them it was a break-in, which it was, technically. Let me handle the rest." Mordecai was already moving, already pulling furniture across the broken window to block out the coming dawn. Keira helped him, and together they managed to make the space secure by the time the eastern sky started to lighten. They spent the rest of the day dealing with the aftermath police reports, insurance claims, getting the window replaced. Mordecai stayed hidden in the guest room, and Keira handled it all with a competence that surprised her. She'd expected to fall apart, to let the break-in trigger her trauma and send her spiraling, but instead she felt stronger, steadier. Maybe because this time she hadn't been helpless. This time she'd fought back. This time she'd won. When night fell again and Mordecai emerged from the guest room, he found her sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea and a determined expression. "We can't keep doing this," she said before he could speak. "We can't just wait in this house for Lucian to send more vampires. Eventually they'll overwhelm us or figure out a way around the threshold magic. We need a better plan." "I agree," Mordecai said carefully. "But what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we go on the offensive. You said Lucian rules the Night Court now, that he has power and influence. But he had to break laws to get that power, right? He framed you. He lied. If we could prove it, if we could show the court the truth, maybe they'd reverse your exile." Mordecai stared at her. "Keira, that would require going to the Night Court, which is in Eastern Europe, which means you would have to leave this house, get on a plane, travel across an ocean." "I know what it means," she interrupted. "I've been thinking about it all day. I'm terrified. The idea of walking out my front door makes me want to throw up. But I'm more terrified of losing you. And if we stay here, hiding in my house, that's exactly what's going to happen. Lucian will keep sending vampires until one of them gets lucky. So we need to take the fight to him. We need to go to the Night Court." "You can barely stand at your window without fear," Mordecai said gently. "How do you expect to travel across the world?" "With you beside me. You said when I was ready, you'd hold my hand. You'd keep me safe. So I'm saying I'm ready. Or at least, I'm ready to try. Because I can't stay in this cage anymore, Mordecai. Not when you're the one who's given me a reason to leave it. He crossed the room and knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. Keira, I am honored by your courage, humbled by it. But I will not ask you to do something that might break you. Your healing, your recovery, that is more important than my exile. No, she said fiercely. It's not. Because my healing doesn't mean anything if I spend the rest of my life locked in this house. You've taught me that. You've shown me what it means to be brave even when you're terrified. You stood outside my window for weeks, night after night, even though you were afraid I would reject you, even though you had nowhere else to go. You were brave for me. Now, let me be brave for you. Tears spilled down Mordecai's pale cheeks. You are extraordinary. I'm terrified. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. They sat there in the kitchen, holding hands across the space between them, and made their plan. They would go to the night court. They would challenge Lucian's rule. They would demand justice, and they would do it together. But first, Keira had to take the most difficult step of all. She had to walk out her front door. They decided to try the next evening, just before sunset, when the light was soft and Mordecai could be there with her without risking burns. Keira spent the day preparing herself, doing all the breathing exercises her therapist had taught her, repeating mantras about safety and courage until the words lost meaning. When Mordecai woke, he found her standing in front of the door, staring at it like it was a dragon she had to slay. "Ready?" he asked softly. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He came to stand beside her, and his hand found hers, cold fingers lacing with warm ones. "We will do this at your pace, one step at a time. If you need to stop, we stop. If you need to go back inside, we go back inside. There is no judgment here, Keira, only support." She nodded, not trusting her voice. Then, with shaking hands, she reached for the doorknob. The metal was cold under her palm, real and solid. She turned it slowly, heard the lock disengage, felt the door swing open on hinges she'd oiled 1,000 times but never used. Cool evening air rushed in, carrying the scent of grass and flowers and the world beyond. Keira's vision started to narrow, started to gray at the edges, and her chest tightened with the familiar panic. But then Mordecai squeezed her hand, and his voice was steady in her ear. "Breathe with me. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. You can do this, I know you can." She breathed with him, matching her rhythm to his words, even though he didn't need breath himself. The panic receded slightly, enough for her to focus, enough for her to take one step forward. Her foot crossed the threshold. Nothing terrible happened. The world didn't end. No one attacked her. She was just standing in her doorway, 1 foot outside and 1 foot in, and she was still alive. "Good," Mordecai murmured. "So good, Keira. Now one more step." She took it, then another, then another. And suddenly, she was standing on her front porch, fully outside her house for the first time in 13 months. The panic was there, screaming at the edges of her consciousness, but it hadn't consumed her. It hadn't won. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm outside. Mordecai, I'm outside." "You are." His voice was thick with pride and emotion. "You are magnificent." They stood there together on her porch, and Keira looked out at her street, at the elm tree where Mordecai had stood vigil for so many nights, at the world that had seemed so impossible to reach. It still looked terrifying, but it also looked beautiful. "I can't walk far yet," she admitted, "but this is a start." "This is everything," Mordecai corrected. "This is proof that you are healing, that you are stronger than your fear." They practiced every evening for the next week. Each night, Keira would walk a little further to the end of her porch, down the steps to the sidewalk, to the elm tree. Mordecai never left her side, never rushed her, never made her feel weak for the times when the panic got too strong and she had to retreat back inside. He was patient and kind, and exactly what she needed. By the end of the week, she could make it to the end of her block. It felt like climbing Everest. "I think I'm ready," she told him one night as they stood beneath a streetlight 3 houses down from hers. "I think I can do this, the trip to the night court. I'm still terrified, but I want to try." Mordecai studied her face in the lamplight, and whatever he saw there made him nod. "Then we go tomorrow night. I will make the arrangements. How do we even get there? Can you fly or something? He laughed. Sadly, no. Vampires cannot fly, despite what the movies tell you. We will travel by plane, like normal humans. Well, you will travel by plane. I will travel in a very secure, light-proof box in the cargo hold, which is significantly less comfortable but necessary given the whole burning in sunlight issue. That sounds horrible. I have endured worse, and it will be worth it to bring you safely to the night court. They spent the next day preparing. Mordecai called in favors from contacts Keira didn't know he had, arranged transportation in safe houses, and all the logistics of moving a vampire across continents. Keira packed a bag with shaking hands and tried not to think about airports and crowds and all the ways this could go wrong. That evening, as the sun set, a black car pulled up outside her house. The driver was vampire, Keira could tell immediately, and she watched as Mordecai spoke with him in low tones before turning back to her. This is Victor. He works for the night court, but he owes me a favor from a century ago. He's agreed to drive us to the airport and ensure our safe passage. Are you ready? Keira looked at her house, at the prison that had kept her safe and trapped in equal measure. Then she looked at Mordecai, at the man she loved, at the future they could have if she was brave enough to reach for it. I'm ready. The drive to the airport was surreal. Keira sat in the back seat with Mordecai's hand in hers, watching the world speed past the windows, and tried to manage her breathing. The panic came in waves, but each time it threatened to pull her under, Mordecai would squeeze her hand or murmur something reassuring, and she would find her footing again. The airport was worse. The crowds, the noise, the sheer overwhelming sensory assault of thousands of people, all moving with purpose, it made her want to curl up in a ball and hide. But Mordecai stayed close, his presence a steady anchor, and somehow she made it through security, through the endless walking to their gate, through the boarding process. She did have a panic attack on the plane, right after takeoff, when the reality of what she was doing hit her all at once. But Mordecai held her through it, his arms strong and sure around her, his voice steady in her ear telling her she was safe, she was okay. He had her. Eventually, the panic subsided, and she fell asleep against his shoulder, exhausted from adrenaline. When she woke, they were landing in Prague. The night court was located beneath the city, accessible through an old Gothic church that had been deconsecrated centuries ago. Keira followed Mordecai down stone steps that seemed to go on forever, deeper and deeper into the earth, until they emerged into a vast underground hall that took her breath away. It was beautiful. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings carved with intricate designs. Massive pillars supported archways that led to corridors branching in every direction. Vampires moved through the space with elegant grace, all pale skin and dark clothes and ancient eyes that tracked Keira's movement with unsettling intensity. "Stay close to me," Mordecai murmured. "Do not meet anyone's eyes directly. Do not accept any offers of food or drink. Do not wander off. The night court operates under old laws and older customs, and humans are tolerated but not protected." "Comforting," Keira muttered, but she pressed closer to his side. They made their way through the halls to a central chamber where the court convened. It was like something out of a dark fairy tale, a throne made of black marble and silver, surrounded by lesser seats arranged in a semicircle, all occupied by vampires who radiated power and age. And on the throne sat Lucian, looking every inch the king he'd stolen the right to be. His eyes widened when he saw them enter, then his face twisted into something ugly. "Mordecai Zorya, how dare you return to this place? You were exiled. You have no right to stand before this court." "I have every right to challenge a ruling made under false pretenses," Mordecai replied, his voice carrying through the chamber. "I have every right to demand justice." "Justice? You speak of justice? You who abandoned your people, who walked away from your crown without a fight?" Lucian stood, and the assembled court murmured, "You gave up your right to justice when you proved yourself weak." "I gave up nothing. You took everything from me with lies and manipulation. You framed me for crimes I did not commit, turned the court against me with false evidence and poisoned words. But I have proof now. I have testimony that will clear my name and reveal your treachery." Lucian's expression flickered with something that might have been fear. "You have nothing. No one would testify against me. I am king now. I hold the power." "Not everyone fears you as much as you think," said a voice from the back of the chamber. A vampire stepped forward, old and dignified, with hair that fell in silver waves and eyes like chips of ice. Keira recognized the other vampire who had been with Lucian that first night, the one who had watched the fight without intervening. "Elder Severin," Mordecai said, and there was surprise in his voice. "I did not know you were still at court." "I have been watching, waiting, gathering evidence." Severin turned to face Lucian, and his voice was cold. "You thought no one noticed the way you manipulated records, the way you coerced council members into supporting your coup. But I noticed, and I have documented everything, every lie, every falsified report, every threat you made to maintain your hold on power. I have been waiting for Mordecai to return, to have the courage to challenge you, so that I could present this evidence to the court." Lucian's face went white. You cannot prove anything." "I can prove everything." Severin produced a thick folder from his robes, held it up for the court to see. 3 years of evidence, testimonies, documents, proof that Mordecai Zorya was falsely accused and wrongfully exiled, proof that you, Lucian, are the traitor, the liar, the one who violated the most sacred laws of our kind. The court erupted into chaos. Vampires stood, shouting questions and accusations, and Lucian's carefully constructed world came crashing down around him. He tried to argue, tried to defend himself, but Severin's evidence was damning, and within an hour the court had reached its verdict. Mordecai's exile was revoked, his name was cleared, and Lucian was sentenced to the same fate he had inflicted on his cousin Exile, wandering, no territory to call home. Keira watched Lucian being led away, watched the rage and disbelief on his face, and felt no pity. He had made his choices. Now he would live with the consequences. When the chamber finally cleared, Mordecai stood before the throne he had once occupied, and the assembled court waited to see what he would do. Keira held her breath. "I was king for 3 centuries, Mordecai said quietly, "and I thought that crown defined who I was. But in the time I have been gone, I have learned something more important. I have learned what it means to be free, to choose my own path, to find meaning beyond power and politics." He turned to look at Keira, and his smile was radiant. "I do not want this throne. I do not want to rule. I want to live, to experience the world as myself, not as a king. So I officially abdicate. Let the court choose a new ruler, someone worthy of the responsibility. I am done with this life." The court erupted again, but Mordecai ignored them. He walked to Keira, took her hand, and led her out of the chamber, out of the halls, back up those endless stone steps to the world above. They emerged into Prague at night, the city lit up and beautiful around them, and Keira laughed with pure joy. They had done it. They had challenged Lucian. They had won. And now they were free. Both of them. "Where do you want to go?" Mordecai asked. "Paris? Tokyo? Rome? Anywhere in the world, Keira. Name it and we will go." "Somewhere with a beach," Keira said immediately. "Somewhere warm and bright and full of life. I want to see the ocean. I want to feel sand between my toes. I want to be surrounded by people and noise and all the messy, beautiful chaos of being alive." "Then that is what we will do." They traveled for months after that, visiting city after city, country after country. Mordecai showed Keira all the wonders he had promised, and she showed him what it meant to experience the world with fresh eyes, with joy and curiosity, and none of the jaded weariness of immortality. They fell more deeply in love with each passing day, learning each other's rhythms, building a life that was theirs alone. Eventually, they settled in a coastal town in southern Italy, a place where the sea was blue and the sun was bright and life moved at a gentler pace. Keira got a job at a local library, using her degree and her love of books to help the community. Mordecai spent his days sleeping and his nights walking with Keira along the beach, talking and laughing and being happy in a way he hadn't been in centuries. 3 years after they left Prague, Keira found out she was pregnant. The pregnancy should have been impossible, vampire and human. The biology didn't make sense, but somehow, miraculously, it worked. The local doctor, who was quietly vampire herself and understood such things, explained that sometimes, very rarely, true love created its own magic, and that magic could overcome even the barriers between species. Keira gave birth on a warm summer night to a daughter with pale skin and dark hair, a child who looked human, but carried the grace and strength of her father's blood. They named her Vesna, which meant spring in several old languages, because she represented new life, new beginnings, new hope. Mordecai held his daughter with trembling hands and tears streaming down his face, and Keira watched him fall in love all over again. They were a family now, unexpected and unconventional and perfect in all the ways that mattered. Years passed. Vesna grew into a bright, curious child who loved books like her mother and had her father's old-world manners and quiet intensity. They lived a quiet life, the three of them, full of small joys and ordinary magic. Keira never forgot where she'd come from, never forgot the woman who had been too afraid to leave her house, but she also didn't let that fear define her anymore. She had conquered it. She had walked out her door, crossed an ocean, challenged a vampire court, and built a life beyond her wildest dreams. On their 10th anniversary, Mordecai and Keira returned to her old house, the one where everything had started. They stood beneath the elm tree where he had kept vigil all those nights, and Keira looked up at the window where she used to stand. "Thank you," she said softly, "for waiting, for being patient, for being too afraid to knock until I finally opened the window. Thank you for seeing me." "Thank you for inviting me in," Mordecai replied, "for giving me a home when I had nowhere left to go, for loving me despite everything I am. You saved my life, Keira Ashford. We saved each other." They kissed beneath the elm tree, beneath the window where their story had begun, and Keira felt the circle close, felt the narrative complete itself. They had both been trapped, both been lost, both been searching for something they couldn't name, and they had found it in each other. That night, they walked along a crowded seaside boardwalk in the town where they now lived, Vesna between them holding both their hands, and Keira looked around at the people and the lights and the beautiful chaos of the world and felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the man who had stood outside her window, gratitude for the courage to finally open it, gratitude for the love that had grown between them, strong enough to overcome fear and exile and every obstacle the universe had thrown in their path. Mordecai caught her eye and smiled, that rare, luminous smile that transformed his face, and Keira smiled back. They had their future ahead of them, full of possibility and promise and all the adventures they would share. They had their daughter, their home, their love. They had everything. And it had all started with a vampire king who was too afraid to knock and a woman who found the courage to open her window and invite him in.